You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, social, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. Visit exopolitics.org and sign up to receive our email notifications, news, and information. Be informed and be aware with Exopolitics Today. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome Elena Danaan back to Exopolitics Today. Thank you, Elena, for being part of this interview and giving us your wisdom and your insights into what is happening around the galaxy.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very honored to be having this meeting with you. It's great. Thanks.
Well, I just wanted to go back a little bit into your past. I mean, you were a professional archaeologist for 20 years, working with different organizations, official French organizations, and you got to work in Egypt and spend time with the Egyptian Antiquities Department and even with Zawi Hawass. So, you were involved at that very senior level. So I just wanted to know, during your 20 years or so, did you come across artifacts or hieroglyphs that to you suggested extraterrestrial life?
Yes, Michael, now that you say it twice, I've been confronted to, in my work was to archive epigraphic data. That means everything that was carved in stone. I was conducting projects. I was mainly based at Karnak Temple in Luxor, and I was leading a department for epigraphy. And on one of the projects I was involved into, it was archiving the decoration of a very, very long wall depicting a battle, the outcome of a battle from Ramses II coming back from Mesopotamia. And you had everything. It was like a cartoon. It was very interesting. That's how they do it. It's like cartoons. You had all the soldiers and everyone coming back from Mesopotamia. And then you have among the prisoners taller beings, taller people dressed with long dresses, and they had high skulls. They weren't wearing any hat. You could really see it was their flesh, their head. It wasn't the Akhenaton style where it's more backwards. No, these were like cone heads. And it was very interesting and disturbing because they had cone heads and wider eyes, and they were taller. So, and it wasn't written who they were. And later on, really studying that really reminded me, these were people coming from Mesopotamia, and it was ancient time. And oh gosh, they really look like Anunnakis.
Wow. Okay.
Really, 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 really. And that was something that really struck me. And these people with cone heads are depicted a few other places in Egyptian reliefs, stone reliefs. So it's stone carving. So it's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And they would all either be priests or coming from abroad, especially from the East. It's very interesting.
So we've heard those stories of Akhenaten and Nefertiti having these big cone heads. So you came across materials showing that was actually common. I mean, that there were a lot of beings that were like this, that had that kind of unique physiology.
Yes, and what was interesting is that the Akhenaton family, it's not the same shape of skull. It's another backward shaped skull, but not the same as those from Mesopotamia. It's more vertical like this. Akhenaton, it goes a little bit backwards. It's more like a gray shape, Akhenaton, and they look very much like a certain race coming from Orion, the Agaroth, who are benevolent beings who have this kind of shape. So yes, it was very, very interesting. Yeah.
Did you ever study the Abydos glyphs? You know, those glyphs that show the spacecraft and the tanks and the aircraft. Did you ever study that?
So yes, I've been to Abydos. I haven't worked there, but I've seen these reliefs. I've worked in Dendera, where there is this famous helicopter-like. I'm gonna break some hearts and dreams because my specialty was to, I was really good at that. That's why I was hired, to understand the different interventions on the same carvings with different periods of interventions. So there would be hieroglyphs carved to sentence, and then 100 years later, somebody would want to change the name or carve something different. So they would plaster it and sizzle it and recarve it. And with time, the plaster goes and you have the both reliefs, just one in the other, and it doesn't make sense anymore. These two places you are talking about, it's recarvings. So it looks weird. It looks like flying saucers or helicopters. In fact, it's two sentences. When you take the sentences, you actually read the sentences, you understand that these are hieroglyphs just superimposed. And so although I am very much believing in extraterrestrials, as you know, on that one, I may say it's not.
Okay, all right. Well, that's
sorry
important.
For that.
That's okay. I mean, the truth is always important, no matter, even if it doesn't go with our prejudices or desires. I did want to ask about the Ra material, the famous channeled material talking about Ra, saying that the Confederation of Worlds actually helped Egyptian society build or flourish around 3000 BC or earlier. I mean, I don't know the exact time, but the Ra material refers to that. So again, with your professional background, did you come across anything suggesting that Egyptian society had been helped by a kind of confederation of worlds?
Well, I haven't read yet the Ra material, but this makes totally sense for me. There is I know from my extraterrestrial contacts that Lyran humanoids were involved also in Egypt at that time. They brought a lot of technology. I know also about a text that is carved in one of the Queen Pyramids in Saqqara. It's not far from the Unas Pyramid. This text, it's one of the rare texts of the pyramids. It speaks about an archaic religion before the religion, the Egyptian religion that we know, which is a solar religion. Before that, it was a star religion. And there is a text that talks about the whole mythology of Osiris and Set and Ra and everyone. So this text says, the god Ra was tired and feeling old. He was tired to be the ruler on earth. So he decided to go back home in Sahu. Sahu is Orion. He decided to go back home to Orion, and he wanted to leave his successors the rulership of the land of Egypt. So that's how everything comes about, the story of Osiris and Set fighting for the rulership of Egypt. They were his children, said. Maybe they weren't just, officers, or we don't know. But that is written. The god Ra was tired, feeling old, and he wanted to go back home in his home in Orion. So that is major thing. And it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's written, it's carved. So,
Well, what do you think of Manetho's history? I mean, Manetho, whose writings were very famous in the Greco-Roman world 2,000 years ago, but only extracts are available now. But from those extracts, I mean, he talks about the 30 Egyptian dynasties, then he talks about the previous era of the demigods, and then the original era of the gods, where I guess Ra and all of these gods, Osiris and so forth, held reign for thousands of years. I mean, did you study the Book of Manetho, or do you have any information about that, especially this period talking about the gods and the demigods?
Yes, well, Manetho had was initiated in some Egyptian temples, and where all the knowledge was kept. And yes, it refers to a period where the gods, the actual Egyptian gods, were ruling upon Egypt. And these gods, they were really non-humans, and they bred with humans to create semi-gods that would rule on the land of Egypt. So this really, what Manetho says, really remind us all the stories of, Enki and Enlil and all the Anunnaki stories. It's really like similar, it's always the fight of two gods for the rulership of humankind. And Egypt has been, we do not have a track of how Egyptian civilization grew. We have the Nagada culture, the ancient prehistoric culture. We have that, where they're just making pottery and shooting arrows. But then suddenly a brilliant civilization is here. Where do they come from? It's like, wow. They're now in the art that we find of this period of the appearance of this suddenly evolved culture. It's very Mesopotamian. And they are white skinned, they are Caucasians. And the Nagara people, the like caveman style ones, they are dark skin. And you really can see that there's an arrival from the East. And that is something that we can keep in mind. So they import the myths as well. They import the memory of the stories of their gods, and all the symbolism, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Just to generalize, and maybe this is something you can clarify, with the Egyptian civilization, it's deemed to have just sprung up around 3100 BC. And of course, we know from the raw material that the Confederation of Worlds was involved with the growth and the flourishing of the Egyptian civilization. But in Sumer, you had the Anunnaki helping that civilization, which suddenly appeared around 3800 BC. So, are we talking about two different extraterrestrial groups working with different historical empires and peoples? On the one hand, the Galactic Federation, today we would call them the Galactic Federation, was working with the Egyptians, and maybe the Orions were working with the Sumerians. Was that, just can you comment on that?
Yes, there are two different groups of extraterrestrials. The Anunnaki are not part of the Federation. They're on their own. They would have more relation with the Orion group. So that was really Sumer and all this area there. They have a colony from there, really came to Egypt, colonized Egypt, and a colony of humans. came from Mesopotamia and just populated Egypt. They brought with them all their cultures and all their mythology linked with the Anunnaki. I don't know if it is straight after this time or a little bit after, but we have input of the Lyran people and people from Orion, but good ones, from Al-Nilam, the star in the Orion belt. And that really matches the time of the pyramids, because the pyramids are just built to reflect the constellation of Orion and taking the Nile River as the Milky Way. So this colony arrives from Mesopotamia with all their culture, and then you have an input of, we could say it's the Galactic Federation. Why not? Because I would believe that because the Lyrans are part of it. So they came, but I suspect that it was a little bit much later, because I think it was at the time, maybe around the Akhenaton period. I don't know, maybe I don't have the data for that, but I know at a certain moment they came and they helped. You know, the Anunnaki redrew. They redrew. So maybe they redrew at the time when this colony left Mesopotamia to come to Egypt. You know, the Anunnaki left at a stage, and I suppose that was the time when the Galactic Federation took over. Mm-hmm. That would be my belief.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, one of the topics that we've discussed before, and I thought it would be great to get an update, is what's happening in Antarctica. In the past, we have talked about the evacuation of the Dark Fleet and the handover of some of the facilities down there to the Chinese and the Turks, who are establishing a presence. And we have a source in Antarctica who has confirmed the information that you gave, which was really amazing, that we have that real life on the ground confirmation that there was something to this, that the Dark Fleet was indeed evacuating Antarctica, just as you said, with many Germans leaving Antarctica in the middle of winter, heading for South America. And so that was very interesting. So do you have any kind of updates on that?
Well, the last updates I had is that there's a portal at the South Pole. But by this portal left all the reptilians and the high-rank officers from the Dark Fleet. All the workers left, as we know, by boat. This portal was a big, big prize to get for everyone. They all wanted it. All the governments knew that there was a portal in Antarctica, but it was held by the Dark Fleet. Since the Dark Fleet had gone, everybody just rushed to take it, because this portal was an access to other worlds. And you like to own an interdimensional portal anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but then I got this intel that the Earth Alliance, who were the one who kicked the Dark Fleet out of Antarctica, had found this portal and had secured it and deactivated it. They deactivated it. That happened in the 2 weeks maybe after Antarctica was freed from the Dark Fleet. So this portal is closed. The thing is, regarding to portals, that's very interesting, because there are portals anywhere. You can create portals when you have the technology. But when you have the technology, you can create a portal that will be temporary and quite small. But there are bigger portals who are kind of natural wormholes that can be either found because in nature there are some, or either created with a really bigger technology and maintained. These portals, either the natural ones or either the ones who are created, they are everywhere. So it would be a bit of a nightmare to try to find them all, to just lock them up, all of them. That's quasi impossible. So what the Galactic Federation has been working on for a while is to find the frequency key that activates and closes these portals. So in May 2021, I had this sudden connection with Thorhan, who is my contact in the Galactic Federation of Worlds. They were on a ship in the orbit of Jupiter, well, out of Jupiter, like very high orbit. And there was a portal there. And it was the first time in my life I could see this through Thorhan's eyes, because when we are in telepathic contact, I can see what he sees. And he looked at the screen, and I could see floating in space. It was like in Stargate movies, exactly the same, like a circle. The edges were a bit blurry and wavy, and inside there was a liquid, kind of bit still, but you could see it was a liquid. There was a little bit of waving on it. It was dark blue, a little bit purple. And he said that this portal is locked to Aldebaran, and they're trying to find the frequency key to shut it down. And they are studying it, trying to find the frequency key, which they found recently. So when I had a chat shortly after that with Tony Rodriguez, I didn't tell him about the portal first, and he said he was telling me his memories privately, and he said, "Oh yes, and there was this portal between Jupiter and Saturn that we used to go through with the Dark Fleet to go to other places." And I went, "What?" I heard other people as well talking about this portal. So this one is closed. That's what they tried to do, to find the frequency key, to just broadcast it and just shut the portals. That's what I've been told.
So the portal in Antarctica that the Dark Fleet and the reptilians used to escape the Galactic Federation and the Earth Alliance, where did that portal take them to? Did that take them to Aldebaran? Did it take them somewhere else?
I know about Aldebaran as well, but because it was locked, you can lock a portal on a certain frequency, but you can also modify the frequency to go to another destination. But this one was also locked on Aldebaran.
Mm-hmm. Well, Antarctica is a really big place. I mean, bigger than, I think double the size of Europe, and almost double the size of the United States. So it's a big, big place. So, is it possible that that the Draconians and the Dark Fleet might still have outposts in different places in Antarctica? They're hiding. Or did most of them leave with what you saw and what Thorhan reported?
Well, of what I have understood, there is none left.
Mm-hmm.
If there are at least no humans, Dark Fleet personnel, if there are some entities left, it may be maybe reptilians who decide to stay in the ground. Mm-hmm. But all human personnel have left. I haven't been told that there were some Dark Fleet personnel, even reptilian, left. Maybe, but if there are, I haven't been told. So I wouldn't say there are some left.
But that was one of the things that you heard, was that as they were leaving, that there was a handover to China and to Turkey, that the Chinese and the Turks were allowed to come in and take over these Dark Fleet facilities.
Yes, because it created a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And the technology that was underneath, and the resources as well. There's a lot of natural resources underneath Antarctica, and there is a lot of underground caverns which are very warm, because there's kind of volcanic activity. It's very warm under there, and there's a lot of things going on. Well, were going on.
One of the things that I remember about interviewing others about Antarctica and the facilities down there was that the Dark Fleet worked very closely with something called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. Others have talked about a consortium of corporations. So that would be very interesting. If the Dark Fleet were leaving, why would they have handed over to the Chinese and the Turks rather than to this kind of interplanetary corporate conglomerate, or what? Yeah, maybe if you can cast light on that process.
Because I believe it's because the interplanetary corporate conglomerate is taking a hit as well, because for two reasons. They are strongly based on Mars, and Mars is being really hammered at the moment by the Federation and the Martian resistance. And that's one. And it's going very well for the good ones. And second, we may talk about these agreements on Jupiter to prepare the future of the star system, in which the ICC, Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, has no place in it.
Interesting.
So that would be maybe why they weren't really in a good place in Antarctica when everything happened. Now I do not have the knowledge of all the little details of which corporations and who are they. I think others have better intel on this topic.
Okay, all right. Well, that's certainly a fascinating topic, and we are going to come back to Jupiter and the different groups that were part of those meetings. But I just wanted to kind of like progress slowly. So, going from Antarctica now, let's go to the moon, because I think you've covered the liberation of the moon. And one of the things that I've come across in the past was there was a Dark Fleet, a joint Dark Fleet reptilian grey facility that was trapezoid in shape, and different people have described being taken there, this trapezoid Dark Fleet base. So is that one of the bases that was newly liberated with the Dark Fleet leaving the moon?
Yes, that happened on the month January and February 2021. The Galactic Federation and the Earth Alliance fleet, I didn't know much at that time. I knew it was a fleet from the Earth Alliance, really liberated the moon, kicked the Greys. What Thoron told me at the time, he said, we are fighting to kick the Orion Greys from the Nebu, from the moon, all the facilities that they held with the reptilians and the Dark Fleet, but it was mainly owned by the Nebu. We are liberating these facilities and kicking the Nebu out of the moon to give the moon back to the people of Earth. So there's been a long conflict of about 2 months going on there, because the Greys wouldn't leave. And it's very difficult to fight underground facilities, because you cannot bombard them. That doesn't do anything. You'd need to work underneath by the underground operations. It's very difficult, and get them out. And once they're out, you can really shoot them. That's what's happening on Mars. So that was going on for a while. The Greys wouldn't want to leave the moon. It was very important for them. It wasn't like, it was very interesting, this resilience and determination of the Greys, the Orion Greys, to keep the moon, because the moon was extremely important for them to control the Earth. It was very handy. It was just in orbit. But it wasn't just about slave facilities and mining. It was a direct control upon Earth. Because, these Greys, Nebu, they had a very old machine on the moon that was broadcasting very low frequency waves to Earth to really numb everyone and put everyone down, very locked in a low vibration. that has been taken by the Federation and the Alliance. It's gone. It's been dismantled. And Thorhan really told me the word dismantled, put apart, and not destroyed. And so that doesn't exist anymore. And the moon is back to the people of Earth. And what he said to me is that now we've done our job. We've removed the invaders from the moon, and now the moon is yours. What you do with it, you blow it up, you fight for it. It's not of our concern. You're responsible of it now. So there may be really a fight from the corporations now to own the moon. I don't know, but that would seem. But that's about the moon, what I know.
Very interesting. Okay, so with the regaining of the moon, the Earth Alliance, humanity getting control with the forced evacuation of the Greys and the reptilians have had to leave the moon, leave the Dark Fleet bases, the trapezoid base there on the far side of the moon. There was also another facility called Lunar Operations Command, which supposedly was an old German base, first given to the Germans, and then it was handed over to the Solar Warden program, and eventually the corporations took control of that. Now, with the liberation of the moon, does that mean Lunar Operations Command is no longer in the power of the ICC, and is now in control of, say, the Solar Warden program and the Earth Alliance, or is something else going on?
No, it's I would say it's in the hands of the good guys, because everything negative and not of this star system is out of the moon. It's been taken out. So every infrastructures that is on the moon at the moment is now in possession of Earth people. So a good corporation, progressive corporations. And I like the way Thorhan told me, uses this word, progressive corporations. That's the word he employed in the Jupiter Agreement story.
Well, that's very actually important because people are familiar with the interplanetary corporate conglomerate that has worked with the Dark Fleet for many decades and has connections with the Nazis, building their facilities in Antarctica and on Mars and so forth. But now what we have is a new crop of companies. We have like Elon Musk's SpaceX. We have Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin. We have Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic. So are these the progressive companies that are now being encouraged to kind of like take control from a civilian perspective, the solar system and what's on the moon?
I think they are. The Galactic Federation keeps an eye on them. They need to prove that they are progressive for the greater good of everyone. I think there are new rules that have been voted recently for preserving the peace in this star system. And I think all these companies that you are naming, they are at the moment in the process to prove that they are beneficent to this this system. I haven't heard that they were really put aside. So let's see what happens. I don't know.
But there's certainly been a shift in the United States in the way NASA awards contracts now, that they're moving away from these older companies that used to get the contracts all the time, like Lockheed and Boeing and Northrup. Now they're giving more and more contracts to SpaceX, and even Blue Origin is starting to get these contracts. So there seems to have been a shift. So that to me is like, well, that is evidence that there has been this transfer of power, if you like, from these kind of like unethical companies that were part of the ICC to this new crop of companies that have a chance to prove themselves, as you say, like SpaceX and Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and so forth.
Yes, yes. And in the recent agreements on Jupiter, I was told they were involved in these meetings a set of progressive corporations and very important corporations, of course, who can really have the support and the skills to help everyone and make of this future progressive future. So it may be these ones, yeah. Maybe these ones.
We'll come back to the Jupiter meeting. I think we should kind of like focus on that shortly. But before then, Mars. I think you've talked about Mars being liberated. We've gone over the moon now, so let's look a little bit at Mars. And one of the things that really got my attention was that there was a scientific study published recently that showed that in the first full year of data collection of seismic events on Mars, they identified 500 Mars quakes. And previously they thought Mars didn't have any seismic activity, but now that they are taking seismic data using one of the landers on Mars, that they are identifying lots of seismic activities, small Mars quakes, 500 of them in the first full year. So the question is, scientists are saying, well, this is surprising to us that shows that Mars has seismic activity after all. We didn't know that. But is that true? Or are these Mars quakes actually evidence of these battles that you say have been happening on Mars over the last year or so, where the Galactic Federation has been helping indigenous Martian civilizations, indigenous reptilians, indigenous insectoids liberate Mars from the draconian Dark Fleet Orion Alliance?
Well, I suppose Mars, as a lot of planets, have a natural seismic activity, but what you're talking about is something really abnormal and really more than it should be, what it should be. That really matches what's happening since about 4 years now. The Galactic Federation has been preparing all this, and they have been preparing, they've done the same thing on Earth. They've been preparing the locals to stand for themselves and liberate their own world. They've been training the Martian resistance, the local species, training them, giving them weapons, really helping them to build a force, a Martian alliance. Actually, it's actually a Martian alliance, like we have the Earth Alliance. And they really motivated these people. There are two main species. Well, there's a lot of life on Mars. There are 3 species I've been made aware, which are 2 are not really from Mars. They've been imported there since a long time. A reptilian species that has nothing to do with the sea cars, the others. A reptilian species and insectoid species, which parts into different groups, but they're all insectoids. And then there is, I think, a local life form, which is a kind of big worm, between a worm and salamander. It has little paws. They call it the burrowers. So these beings are being used either by the resistance or either by the reptilians. You just have to catch one and tame it. So they're just basic life forms. The reptilian Martians are those who really are more advanced, intellectually, and lead the resistance. They've been so trained, and since 4 years now, they've started little raids to just blow up structures, but it was little things. Since when was it? April 6th, when I had this news from Thoron, April 6, 2021, when I connected with him, and because there was real tension that happens when he's tensed, he was in orbit of Mars, involved in a raiding Mars. It was he was saying we've started raids on Mars. And parallel to that, the Martian resistance started also operations in the undergrounds. And that because that's where it happens, helped with the Federation. It's exactly like the Earth Alliance cooperation, military cooperation. So they were really shooting and bombing in the undergrounds, the reptilian and the dark fleet facilities, you know. So that really corresponds to the seismic activity that is linked, surely.
So, well, I know from my own research, there are kind of 3 different human type facilities on Mars that have been built since the 1940s. Of course, the dark fleet facilities, they were the first. Then there were the ICC facilities, the corporate facilities that build advanced technology using captive human slaves that are exploited. And so they have these big bases throughout Mars. And I know Tony Rodriguez says he was taken there and spent a little bit of time at one of these places and was tested there. And the third are these kind of like military mercenaries that are recruited on Earth from the different military branches and sent to Mars to provide protection for the ICC facilities. And Randy Kramer, I interviewed him back in 2014, and he says he served in one of those, and their job was to fight against the indigenous Martians, the indigenous reptilians and insectoids. So if the Earth, if the Galactic Federation is helping the indigenous reptilians and insectoids free their planet, so are they just attacking the Dark Fleet facilities, or are they also attacking, you know, the corporate facilities and these kind of mercenary military forces belonging to the Earth?
Well, everyone, actually. They attack everyone that is working with what they call the Dark Alliance. It's a triangle, the Nebu Orion, the Sika Reptilian Empire, and the Dark Fleet. They call it the Dark Alliance. Anyone who is involved with working with them or protecting them needs to go. So they're attacking everyone. The thing is, with the Galactic Federation, they have a policy to not kill unless it's really necessary. That's their policy. So they're not going to bomb when there are hostages or slaves or people in it that are not really leading the bad thing. So there's been a lot of evacuation, and especially lately. When was it? It was on July 5. I received this intel that all the facilities held by reptilians and humans cooperating with reptilians had been retaken. Not the Dark Fleet ones yet. They are still there. They're just having a problem with the Dark Fleet, although they're diminishing in power. So there has been all these facilities held by either reptilians, either human working with reptilians, have been liberated. And so I suppose all the humans involved there must have been brought back to Earth. Because, you know, all these poor soldiers who have been just taken to work there or involved there, I mean, they're not really the baddies. They're just hired, and some are even victims, and they didn't ask for it. So these ones are, even if they've been taken to work for the baddies, I mean, they're victims as well. So these ones are really taken care of and brought back to Earth. So that's what I know. Now Mars is not yet totally liberated, but the Dark Fleet is still there apparently.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So like if we take, for example, you know, like the prime corporate base on Mars, Ares Prime, you know, Tony says he spent time there. Randy Kramer says he was part of a military unit to protect Ares Prime, and at Ares Prime it was run by this kind of ICC. and it was exploiting captive slave labor, that it was exploiting humans. So has Aries Prime been liberated, and how would that happen? You know, what would the liberation of Aries Prime look like with these indigenous reptilians and insectoids coming in? Would it be like just overrunning the facility, evacuating all of the human slaves to Earth? All of the military defenders are told get back to Earth, and the corporations basically lose everything.
Well, the Federation lets the local doing the heroic acts of liberation. Of course, they're helped, but and supported, but all the evacuation is performed by the Galactic Federation. You know, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Earth Alliance helps in the process. Well, they have enough to do with Earth already, but how this would look like would be just the resistance rushing in, and once combat is really engaged, the Federation just steps in and evacuate everyone. And there is a reassignment of the facility. Now, who's gonna have it? I don't know. Probably the locals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know yet how that's going to turn out.
Okay, well, that's very important then. So that means that in the over 70 years of human colonization of Mars that was done secretly, you know, first through the Dark Fleet, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate and so forth, that a lot of that is being kind of like undone. A lot of the humans are being forced to leave, and the indigenous Martians are now taking control of their planet. And that's the liberation that's happening on Mars right now.
Yes, it's happening on Mars right now as we speak. As we speak. Mm-hmm. And it is exactly the same plan as it's happening on Earth. Mm-hmm. The Federation training, giving technology, helping the locals to build forces, to be able to fight the enemy. That's how they do.
Interesting.
On Mars as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of your most recent updates was the moon Phobos, one of Mars's two moons, and you talked about how that was liberated and captive humans were freed. I presume they are being repatriated, you know, whether to Earth or some holding facility. So, you know, anything you want to add to that, to the update on the liberation of Phobos, and what timeline might we expect for the other moon, Deimos, to go through the same liberation?
The two main Mars satellites, Phobos and Deimos, were since a very long time property of the Greys. So two different types. Phobos was property of the Zeta Greys, the small Greys from Zeta Reticuli, sorry, called Xrog. And Deimos was property, maybe still is, but not for long, of the Mithra, who are tall Greys. These ones are from Andromeda Galaxy, but they work with the Nebu from Orion, so they have agreements with them, so they kind of part of them in a way. On Phobos, since a very long time, Phobos is hollowed. It's been totally carved inside, and there's a facility inside where they recreated, of course, conditions of atmosphere and gravity to be able to work there, of course. This was serving a treatment of abductees from Earth to chip them and sort them, to dispatch them for different scientific experiments. So many were sent to Mars or other destinations. So they were preparing abductees for scientific or medical experiments. It was a big central. That has been liberated. That I got this intel the 24th of July, very recently, that finally all the slaves, well, the abductees, they were not really slaves, I would say, abductees were taken out, and then they could really attack it. It's very difficult, what Thoran told me, is because these operations are very highly sensitive. They cannot just come and bombard it, and kill the enemy. Everywhere they have human hostages, everywhere. So the good forces, they don't want to just, they could go and nuke everything, and that's done in 1 hour, the war is won. But how many casualties? That's wrong. So they try to liberate as many people as they can. So that's what they did on Phobos, and then took over. I don't know the details of the operations, but that's what happened. So Phobos is now in the hands of the Federation to be given in a later time to whoever corporation or military force will take care of it from Earth. The next operation in this is Deimos, the other satellite. So it's imminent, if not happening as we speak. There are slaves. That's a sorting facility, it's a small sorting facilities for slaves. The Mitra are very much involved in slave trafficking, galactic slave trafficking. They do a lot of profit with this. So they hold this one, and they trade to other species, slaves from Earth. It could be like a slave market, I would say. That's not funny. Yeah, that's in the process. I think it may happen now, because I know Thoran is very in the middle of big operations. Next step, I can tell about it. It's Ceres colony and Saturn. There's a lot of bad stuff on Saturn. The Nebu have hold facilities on Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Dark Fleet is involved as well on Saturn. There's a lot of bad stuff there. That's going to be big thing, Saturn, big thing. They haven't yet started, I know. Ceres, it's very sensitive because there's a lot of civilians there, and they cannot attack because, Ceres was at the start Nebu Gray owned facility, and they shared it with the Dark Fleet. Now it's a shared facility with the Dark Fleet. They work together, and so it's very difficult. Ceres is really something they were really reluctant to do because they need to secure all the civilians. It's difficult, but it's in the plan. That's what I know for the moment.
Mm-hmm. So with regard to Ceres, I mean, of course, that Tony Rodriguez says that he was based on Ceres as a slave for the Dark Fleet for, I think, 13 years, operating on some merchant ships there. So did you actually, from Thorhan's perspective, confirm that? I mean, was that something Thorhan saw, that indeed there is a Dark Fleet there? And I think, I can't remember how many people Tony said were there, but I think he said there were several million, a lot of people on Ceres. So is that accurate, that that's how many people are there, and that it's a big problem now in terms of this liberation?
I didn't have the number, but I know it's a lot. And the number of civilians, it's really packed there. It's a problem for conducting any operation on Ceres, but it's in the plan. Yes. How did I learn about Ceres? Last year, I hadn't had a news from Thorhan for a few days, and when he reconnected, he was coming back from a mission in the asteroid belt, and I said, "How weird." And he said, "Yes, we went there to liberate hostage someone important from the Federation, a woman that was taken there in the asteroid belt, and he named Sirius, and he said that they have slaves and they take people there, they capture people and they bring them there. And that's how I learned about Sirius being held by the Greys and people being taken as hostages. It's only recently that he told me that it had been, you know how he told me that this planetoid was shared with the Dark Fleet? It's when we got to speak about the domain. It's the domain having, regarding to the book that's been written that we all know, Alien Interview, that the domain had a facility, a very important base in the asteroid belt. And Thoran confirmed that it was Sirius. And he said, yes, but now they gave it the share of it with the Dark Fleet. I think he told me since the 1940s or something, you know, these years. And that's how I learned in the conversation that the Nebu decide to share with the Dark Fleet the facility, but it's way more older than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic. That corroborates what Tony says that he experienced for 13 years as a slave on Sirius through the Dark Fleet. So that's very helpful. That. So now I think we should really spend a little bit of time on these meetings near Jupiter, because that's very, very important. That seems to have been a major milestone, and the way you described it, or the communication you forwarded to me from Thorhan, summarized it as a handing over of authority, really, for the entire solar system from these regressive races, the Draco, the Nebu, and the Orions, to the Earth Alliance and to this kind of like progressive coalition of space commands that is now emerging on Earth. So you want to kind of like tell us a little bit more about that message?
Yes, sure. I always knew there was on Jupiter that this from Thorhan, a facility that it's huge. It's really huge. It's held by different positive entities. You have the Ashtar Galactic Command, and you have the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and you have also the Council of Five. But it's mainly held by the Ashtar Galactic Command, the positive one. And the Federation has a diplomatic space in it to conduct diplomatic negotiations, because it's like a neutral ground, of what I understand. So that was happening there. And this is it's like a floating city in between layers of atmosphere of Jupiter. It's huge, really huge, amazing. So what it was on, sorry, July 14, I got this telepathic connection, I'm gonna say, with Thoran. He was on his ship, and I say, where are you? He said, I'm on orbit of Jupiter. I'm just escorting officials of the Federation to important meetings on Jupiter. And I say, what about these meetings? He said, I'm not allowed to tell you exactly all about it now, but he told me afterwards, a few days later. He told me everything about it. He said that the agreements are complete. And so what was it about? He said, high representative of the Galactic Federation of Worlds have been meeting in a series of meetings during many days, Earth representatives of space programs, different space forces, and different progressive corporations. That's when he used the term progressive corporations. They have been meeting to decide who will manage to who will manage the safety zones in this star system. And so it didn't really say too much about safety zone. I just record the word, okay, safety zones. But then you told me, you, Michael, told me about it afterwards. It was quite mind-blowing. So safety zone. So there was a series of meetings with representatives of the Federation, aliens, and Earth representatives, leaders of secret space programs, and some corporations, big corporations, but progressive ones, to decide to remap the star system and to decide who will take care of what and the future of the star system in a progressive way, and the security, the safety of this system by safety zones. And he said that there are 14 countries who have a space program, and then 8 were selected. These were meeting separately in different rooms with different representatives and presenting their projects for the future of the star system. And one at the end was selected to lead all the other ones and just manage them and take care of the management of everything in the star system. So the United States of America won the prize because they were best able by their skills, and what they wanted to have is the spirit, the protection, because they had the spirit of, you know, being guardians and protectors, and all the cooperation going with them were willing to do a progressive work, not service to self, but service to the greater good of the humanity in the star system. So, and after he said that to me, he was on board his ship, and he said, the agreements are over. And he looked at the screen, and I saw 3, it was like ovoid silvery ships, a little bit thinner at the back, leaving the orbit of Mars. They were coming from behind Mars and passing under his ship. And he said, oh, that's the Earth delegations. There are 1 per ship, and the ones that haven't been selected in the final meeting. And there were 3. And he said, oh, 2 of them, it's the Chinese delegation and the Russian delegation. They're apparently very grumpy, he didn't say grumpy, he said another word, unhappy, because they hadn't been selected to manage everyone. And they didn't want to be under the rulership of America, obviously. Yes, that's it. So,
well, that's amazing information. And the thing about it that really got my attention is that it closely matches what we know of the Artemis Accords, that the Artemis Accords were set up in kind of the latter part of 2020 under the Trump administration, and that they were a set of bilateral agreements between the United States and 7 countries, which is now expanded to roughly 11 countries. And that it talks about safety zones. It talks about a multinational coalition to promote scientific research, to promote peaceful exploration of space, and mutual defense, based on very important principles, exactly what you were saying. So, you know, when you look at the language of the Artemis Accords and what you were told by Thorhan and the Galactic Federation, to me, it's clear that the Galactic Federation was working with the Trump administration in 2020 in coming up with the Artemis Accords. And in fact, we actually had confirmation of that from this Israeli scientist, Professor Haim Eshed, the founder of Israel's space program, who came out at very late 2020, I think it was December 2020, with a book and an interview where he said, yeah, that the Galactic Federation is working with the Trump administration. So very amazing information. So this all corroborates. So these political processes that anyone can confirm exist, are real, corroborates everything you've just said about Thorhan and setting up a system where there's a multinational coalition with the US at the center of it, being acknowledged as the leader, and that China and Russia were very unhappy with that. That matches exactly what has happened with the Artemis Accords and with the failure of China and Russia in attracting any support for their joint lunar exploration mission. They got zero support for it. And I think that shows that every major nation that has a space program wants to work with the US under the Artemis Accords, and other countries are signing on. There are some NATO countries like Germany, France are going to be signing on pretty soon, but Britain, Italy, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Japan, Brazil, South Korea have all signed on to the Artemis Accord. So all of the major nations, and you said there were 14 nations that were represented at these meetings, and they match up with the members of the Artemis Accords, along with other countries yet to join, like France, Germany, and India, and of course Russia and China.
That's it, because when you say 11 in the Artemis Accord, that's Thorhan said 14, so that is weird. But in fact, there are other countries that are not yet in the Artemis. That's it. So it matches. Okay. Yeah, I understand now.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So you said that, this in your message, you said that there were 12 meetings overall that the Galactic Federation conducted with these different delegations from each of the spacefaring nations. And in the end, there were 8. Sorry, in the end, there were 3 meetings. You said that there were 3 meetings, and that there was a kind of like the final meeting had six nations represented in the final meeting. But you said that there were kind of like, maybe you can clarify there, the final 3 meetings, there you had the final 6 in the last meeting, and then there were like, was it 8 or 9 in the other 2 meetings, Russia, China being a part of that?
There were 12 different meetings spread on time, and every time these 12 meetings were not everyone together each time. It was groups, and so there were 12 meetings.
The second email, in your second email, you said the Galactic Federation only wants to work with a unified global civilization, not with a clutter of different rival space forces playing power games. Thorhan said that there are actually 14 countries involved in space programs who are represented there, but a top 6 have programs recognized by the Galactic Federation as most progressive and durable.
Yes.
Okay. So those top 6, that didn't include Russia and China.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm. It's very important, because that means now we are truly entering into a kind of like a Star Trek future, if you like.
Yes.
That we have a multinational space coalition that's been created, and the major nations. It's interesting, looking at the creation of Space Force and Space Command. The United States was the first to set up a space command. That was back in, I think it was 1985. Then Russia, France set up a space command in, I think it was 2005. And then China set one up in 2014. And then in 2021, this year, you had Britain, Germany, Italy, and Australia all setting up space commands, and other countries are following up. So these are the nations that make up your top 6, the ones with space commands. That's it. It all matches.
Incredible. Oh my gosh, incredible. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite impressive that, Michael, every time I give you intel from Thorhan, I just give you, and I write to you straight away. And after these agreements, this intel about these agreements, I literally wrote my notes down straight away and just copy paste it to you in an email. that you are, and it was, so I just transmit to you, and then you just blow my mind finding correspondence with all of this. It's absolutely incredible. Incredible.
I think it's fantastic that you're getting this real-time intel that you can pass on to me, and I'm so delighted to be able to put that in the context of these space developments that are ongoing, because that's what I study full time, and so I have a good knowledge of that. But to combine that knowledge, working knowledge, with real-time intel is really fantastic, and a joy to work with you, because as a researcher, this is what we lack. We lack the real-time intel. We don't get it from the governments. We don't get it from Freedom of Information Acts. Whistleblowers often are talking about things that happened 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So to get events that are happening right now from the Galactic Federation is fantastic. So you're doing incredible work. And Thorhan is, I'm so glad that he and others are passing on this intel to you.
Thank you, Michael. It's very impressive. I'm not a specialist in politics or exopolitics even, and I'm just a normal person. I was just rescued by Thorhan, and he's a military officer in the Federation. He's not even in the intelligence, knowing everything about everything. It just tells me what he sees, what he witnesses, what's happening in his work, what he witnesses in his work. And this is so precious because it gives like live testimony of what's happening. And it's true that you always know how to find the correspondence to existing events. It's impressive.
Yes, it's very important. So I'm looking forward to more updates, and that way everyone can learn about what's really going on in our solar system. So just to finish off, I thought it would be really interesting if you just comment about this new contactee that you've made, that you've gotten in touch with, because apparently her extraterrestrial contact is also from the Pleiades, and he actually was Thorhan's old commander or captain. So can you tell us about Valnek and Megan Rose?
Yes, so I've been contacted by Megan Rose, who told me that she was abducted by actually reptilians and rescued in the process. And the story seemed quite familiar to me, of course. And she said the name of the Nordic being who rescued her was Valnek. And she described all the crew. She described Thorhan. She described Myra, the scientist on board the rescue ship. And I went, Valnek, yes, he's Thorhan's very good friend. When I hear these testimonies like this, I always double check. So I asked Thorhan, and he said, yes, indeed, we rescued this little girl. So everything matches. And when my mind was blown away to find someone who was rescued by the same team, the same crew. At that time, in few decades ago and until quite recently, Thorhan and his team were rescuing a lot children and abductees, especially children. It was their work. They weren't the only crew. There were several other crews who were doing that, other ships. Valnek has been, until recently, ship captain. He was the captain of the ship, and Thorhan was pilot on board. Then Valnek got promoted commander, fleet commander, and Thorhan became ship captain, and then until Thorhan was promoted commander as well recently. But Megan Rose, it's very impressive because she described to me exactly the interior of the ship and things I haven't even put in my book. Things I know because I haven't put all the details. So I really knew she was really, really honest and describing the same people, the same ship. And she even said that in one of the rooms, there were other children as well who were rescued. That was mind-blowing. So, and shortly after that, I received an email of a third person, a woman who said, I've been rescued as well. But I was abducted by Grace and I was rescued by a team of Nordic beings. And one of them came to me and he said, my name is Valnek. And that was mind-blowing. So it's testimonies of people who have been rescued by the same crew who rescued me. I love that.
That's incredible, because now we're getting multiple corroboration for your own story from these other people that are independent, and they're citing experiences that match what you've had, and without using any kind of public database, because you haven't written about Valnek, and here you have two people now coming forward telling you about Valnek, the old commander of Thorhan. So that truly is amazing. So by finishing off, why don't you tell us about how people can get in touch with you, any kind of upcoming events you have, any kind of special things that you want to promote?
Thank you, Michael. So people can join me, find me by my YouTube channel, Elena Danaan, where I put all my updates, interviews, Q&As, videos. You can find all about me there. I have a website, elenadanaan.org, where you can find services on there and my books. And otherwise, my book, Gift from the Stars, I think I have it, where I write my story, available on Amazon.
Fantastic. So, and you have you're working on a second book. Can you tell us when you think that'll be ready?
It's going to be ready early September, if not the 1st.
Wow.
I'm in the proofreading at the moment and editing. It's finished. This book is about everything we're talking about now, my experience and contact with people from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, everything that happened after my first book was written, my encounters with Val Thor. That's the main thing in this book. I met him 3 times, and the conversations I had with him that I could remember thanks to Thorhan, because to really set my memory to remember it was, otherwise it's very difficult to remember conversations. So this and all the updates we're talking about are in it, and all my travels. I haven't traveled a lot in this star system, but I've had some travels. So all this, all about this, the more lively experience that I share with everyone. So soon. Well,
thank you, Elena, so much. And you truly are a gift to humanity. So thank you and aloha.
Aloha, Michael. Thank you.
So that was Elena Danaan giving us her fantastic information about what is happening in our solar system. And truly, we are at the dawn of a new age. And so I decided that for my next webinar, I'm going to be focusing on our Star Trek future. So I'll be putting out a notice with information about that. And what we are witnessing right now is the unfolding of a very long-term plan for creating a multinational space coalition around the US, which matches very closely with what Gene Roddenberry envisaged in his original idea of Starfleet. So I'll be going into that in this upcoming webinar, information you can get from my website. So thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to Exopolitics Today.